This one is entitled Mirror Image, the Energy of Inversion. I've been doing a lot of thinking today, just, going over occurrences in these YouTube streets. The clashes of personality, existence, subscribes, and followers. A lot of that is happening, and it got me to thinking about this one scene in this movie. I can't even recall the title of this movie, but this scene takes place in an attic, and there's this siren type of feminine energy, and she has on this flowing white dress, and she's attempting to seduce this masculine character, and she is successful to a degree, and he's attempting to fight her, but his fight is weak. And so they embrace one another, and they kiss, and they turn, and there's this mirror, and he's able to see the mirror image of what he perceives is taking place. He finds her beautiful, beyond resisting. Yet when he looks at the mirror image, the reflection, he sees a hideous creature, somewhat of a corpse filled with a demonic spirit as her reflection. And I've been pondering on that scene. This is day number 2. And it just had me in my thoughts and in my feelings. And it made me stand before the mirror and to assess what it was that I was actually seeing. Was my perception of myself lining up with what my eyes perceived as my mirror image? How content I was in myself, and how discontent I became with certain aspects. Minimal, nonetheless, but apparent. And it just got me to thinking about these YouTube streets. And it just had me asking questions as I watch this personality here, this personality there. And there's been a lot of commotion. There's been a lot of combativeness. There's been a lot of quote-unquote exposés. And I'm wondering, when you look in the mirror, do you see what I see? When you look in the mirror, does what you see with your eyes line up with your perception of what it is that you are? And sometimes that's not easy for most as we navigate through these waters called life. But it depends on how you were nurtured and how you value that nurturing aspect of your parents or grandparents or those who had dominion over you, as to how it will affect you when you become an adult. I remember growing up, my mom, she was so wise beyond her own understanding. And I'm not even sure if she would decide and calculate this is how she wanted to be. I just think it was something that flowed, naturally. She was very, very keen as to my existence. And I had one sibling, but she was always on me about being accountable. And my mother's presence and my father's presence in the home were presences that truly spoke volumes to me. So when she wanted to give a lesson or she took a stance or a position, I was definitely at attention. And when she would be in these stances to make me be a parent about being accountable, it was difficult for my flesh. But her dominion over me was far more compelling, so I paid more attention to that. Even into adulthood, I remember when I was 35 and I had this friend. She and I had been friends for a number of years. Our children even played together. She and I didn't frequent one another's households, but when our time was free, we did take time to just commune, fellowship. Well, I took a turn for the reality of what the facts were. That there was more to the friendship that I was not willing to confront or to embrace. I just wanted the perks of the friendship. And so she took something I shared with her in private and she used it for her own motives and intents, and it caused me some pain. And I lost something that I valued and I cared for very much. And I remember as I began to be emotional about it, and I was crying, and I was like, I can't believe it, playing the victim. And my mother came by, and she was like, sweetheart, what's going on? She was like, are you okay? Attempting to be nurturing and comfort me. And I shared with her what happened between me and this friend. My mother was one that I can count on one hand the number of times that she's actually yelled in my presence at me or at anyone else. She wasn't that type of energy. Very seldom did she even cuss. And that's not something that I was accustomed to hearing. But this particular day, she sat there and she listened for about 2 or 3 minutes. And she did something that she wasn't known for doing. She opened the palm of her hand and she slapped the glass table that we were sitting at. And she said, just stop it right now. And I remember it jolted me so that I instantly stopped crying. Those tears ceased because I was at attention now. This was not something that I was accustomed to seeing my mother do, so I knew that I had to reverence it and respect it. And she asked me, she said, was she your friend? And I was like, yes, ma'am. She said, did you willingly accept her as your friend? I said, yes. She said, so she didn't creep in some dark space behind some bushes and force you to be her friend. I was like, no, that's ridiculous. No, ma'am, she did not. She said, so it was mutual, it was willing. And I had to admit in that moment, yes, it was. She said, okay, young lady. She said, get yourself together. She said, because whatever it is that you're experiencing from this friendship at this particular moment, and I keep hearing you talk about her, she said, you're 100% responsible, just like she's 100% responsible. She said, I'm not going to sit here and listen to you blame and place blame solely on her. She said, if your reality is one that you're not pleased with, she said, then change it. She said, don't you ever in my presence give anyone that much control over your reality. And I was 35. An adult, with my own household, with my own responsibilities, and she shook me. She shook the very essence of my soul and reminded me that I was her little child in that moment. And I remember she looked at me and she grabbed my face and she kissed me. And she said, I'm leaving. And she got up and she kissed my children and she gave them affirmations and she walked out that door. And I watched her in her movement, in her display, and my perception of her was that she was wonderful. Even though she shook my pride. She shook my arrogance. She even stupefied my intelligence. And I watched her sashay off. And I could see my neighbor's house, her front door from my front door. And my mother crossed that street and went over to this friend's house, knocked on the door, and she asked her, could she give her children money to buy them a treat, whatever she approved of and that they wanted. And this friend said yes. And I watched my mother give this to this woman. And she turned around, told this friend to have a wonderful day, and she affirmed her children through kind, loving words, as she would always do. And she got in her car and drove off. That is the lifestyle that I lived with my parents, and especially my mother. So I'm accustomed to looking in the mirror at the image that I see, checking if it matches up to what I believe my perception is of myself. And I have to say, that's not something that most of my peers had growing up in their households. And I see the difference that it made in me as an individual, as a powerful being. You know, it is not a struggle for me to view my mirror image, even when it may be drastically different than what I perceive about myself. And because this is my upbringing, this is the foundation and the core of how I maneuver through these waters called life. And as I'm maneuvering and I'm swimming, I have to make this foundation applicable to scenarios. Whenever I see a situation where someone is off kilter publicly because of something that they've done, when there is an accuser or an addresser or a commentator that's speaking, unfavorably about what an individual believes about themselves, I can see that they were voided of those lessons that have shaped me as an individual. And I have to speak now in reference to the combativeness, the commotion that's going on between various quote-unquote black YouTube personalities. And as they present themselves to my reality when I'm scrolling, or when I'm just going to my channel, you have that feed and it presents itself. So when my spirit is unctioned to click onto something, I see these commotions and I see these combative commentaries and these exposés of the images in mirrors that maybe self doesn't want to see. I can see that these individuals, these beings, these personalities are voided of foundations as myself. It's apparent. There have been scenarios where people have been confronted with the facts of their actions, adverse or positive as they may be, and the person that's being confronted, just as I was confronted by my mom, that wise feminine energy that comes to place itself before your existence. And because of the powerful nature of this energy, you have to bow in submission as a child. But we know, because we are adults and we have experiences with children, that you have good seed and you have bad seed. Now, submission, or the appearance of submission, does not dictate whether a seed is good or bad. The harvest dictates that. And we have surpassed harvest season. And some people, some YouTube personalities, as much as they have desired when planting hoping that they turn a good harvest, apparently have not. And it is so apparent that some people just don't want to accept the fate of their harvest, and they're attempting to pass it off as if it is good and presenting it to the masses in these markets where people are ravenous to eat, because it's time to eat now. It's time to partake of the fruit that's been presented as harvest. And it's coming up sour. And you as a farmer just don't want to accept. So we give an example. You have a farmer who has planted a crop, and that harvest is an excellent harvest. You present it to market and people come to partake, and they see that it is sweet. They see that it is nutritious. They see that it's a wonderful thing. And their senses, the senses co-sign. And then one begins to tell another and another and another, and before you know it, it has spread. The word is spread that this farmer has good fruit. Then there are some farmers who have planted, and they have planted seed that has not yielded a good harvest. But because they are so adamant with not functioning in the reality of the facts, they want to force people, coerce people, convict people, con people, finesse people into believing that this fruit is good. And people are coming to market to this farmer, and they're partaking of this fruit, which is labeled organic, which is labeled natural, and people are taking bites, and it's sour. Most of it is spoiled, but ultimately it has no seed. People, you cannot fool and con at the market. You just can't. You're being exposed as a farmer who doesn't want to be accountable. It is better for you to suffer this loss and go back to the drawing board and take note along the way of those who are pointing out your error, and go back to the drawing board. Admit the failure. There is no win, there is no success in persisting in this illusion or inversion of your actual mirror image. But nevertheless, some beings and energies are just persistent to a detriment. And because of that, some will view it as entertainment, and the audience will ensue. Invite other like audience members, and it will be a skit on stage with actors, directors, scripts, plots, and props. So which are you? The farmer who has yielded an excellent harvest, and those that partake of your fruit can attest? Or are you that farmer who has yielded that bad crop, who doesn't want to accept his fate and keeps selling the fruit and getting bad reviews? Pick your side. You have to be accountable. And just because your perception of something is what it is, and you feed and you shroud and you dress up and you freeform this perception, but does it hold up to the test of your mirror image? And that is my question on today. What does your mirror image say? And what will you do about it if it's not favorable?